Hi guys, I'm Jamie from the Abode Academy and welcome to our YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe for any future videos. Okay, so we're going to talk about a question I get asked constantly, which is which tip sizes and what pressure are you using? I've got in my tip box behind me here hundreds of tips that just don't get used anymore. So when I first started spraying, I was using all these different tips, then I ended up in the end just using 3. And I'm not saying that what I'm saying is going to, cover everybody and what they use, but personally for me, this is what's worked best. Okay, so I've got the first thing I'm going to pick up here is the 515, which is for my emulsion for the walls. And let me explain to you what those numbers mean. So the 5, you're going to times that by 2. That's going to give you the diameter of the fan. So if you times 5 by 2, that's going to give you 10 inches of fan size. That second number, which is the 15, is going to give you a 15 orifice. So that's how big the hole size is of letting the paint through. So you've got a 10-inch fan there with a 15 orifice. I don't think you need any more than that for the walls, to be honest. I think that's enough. Obviously, the more paint you're letting through, the more chance of runs. I think a 10-inch fan is big enough. Obviously, if you were doing a job where it was like, a big warehouse and they're all one color and it's like a lot of walls, then you want to maybe put something a bit bigger in, maybe like a 6 to give you a 12-inch fan. But that first number, it doesn't matter what tip it is, and the second number even as well, that is going to represent that tip. So if you had a 6, 19, that's going to give you a 12-inch fan, 19 orifice. Okay, so now what we're going to do is move on to the 619, and this is a tip that I use for ceilings. So that 6, again, you're going to times that by 2, so that's going to give you a 12-inch fan. The 19, that is going to give you the orifice. So that is a 12-inch fan with a 19 orifice. So compared to the 15 there, the 515, then you obviously got a bigger hole size. That means more paint's going on. So now I'll be using that on my ceilings because I want to get that coating nice and wet. And because it's sort of upright, you can sort of put more load of paint on there, so it's not going to run as much because you haven't got the weight of the paint pushing against the paint. So that's why you're creating runs. So with a ceiling, you really want to get that paint on there nice and thick and it all levels out nicely. So I would go for the 619 personally. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the 310 gold. And this is what I'm going to be using mainly for my woodwork. I would say probably all of my woodwork, to be honest. So this 310 is going to be a 6-inch fan and a 10 orifice. And now you can see that the second number now has changed to a 10. So that's a lot smaller. So that means you're letting less paint out. A 6-inch fan, I think, is absolutely perfect for most jobs, like skirting boards, doors, windows, etc. The only time you'd want to put maybe a smaller tip in is like a 210, so that's going to give you a 4-inch fan, still 10 orifice, like spindles, maybe like small window beads, something like that. But I'd say in general, like the 310 for all my woodwork is mainly what I use. I think if you try and spray, say with a 210 on skirting boards and doors, then you're making the fan too small. So you're putting too much paint in one area. I like to spread that over a 6-inch. I think it gives you a better finish, and I think actually you get more of an even spread, if you know what I mean. So as you can see, these two tips are 2 different colors. You've got a gold and you've got like a turquoisey greeny color there. And what that represents on that is a high pressure tip because it's that color, and that is a low pressure tip because it is the gold color. Obviously Graco do this as well, so you might get a Graco tip. It's a green tip, which would be a low pressure, and then like a blue tip will be their high pressure. You can buy low pressure emulsion tips, which will be gold. So that would, I would say anything that second number goes over, so say that it went to above the 12 on the second number, then I think you're then going into emulsions, I'd say. So if you had a 312, that would still be woodwork. If it goes to 315, then I'd say that you're going into your emulsion tips in low pressure. Like I said, I don't like the low pressure tips for emulsion. I think because they come out like so feathered on the edges, it's like it's spraying an aerosol can around the room. There's a lot of dust, a lot of overspray compared to the lower pressure, the higher pressure tips, sorry, is that you're getting that, really getting that sort of push onto the ceiling. So if you're spraying ceilings, then when that paint hits the ceiling, it stays there because it's pushed up at such high pressure. So I think for me personally, when we're training these guys here, they walk in with a mask and it's absolutely covered in paint. I always say, are you using low pressure tips? Their normal answer is yes. And I'll say it's because it's not quite getting there and it's sort of coming down again. Obviously that could be a lot of things. It could be their distance is not right, but for me personally, a lot of that is because the tip is not pushing the paint hard enough onto the ceiling. So for me, for all my emulsions, I'm using the high pressure tips, and for all my woodwork, I'm using the low pressure tips. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this out of the packet now. And what you'll notice is that in the back of this packet is actually a piece of paper. And what this piece of paper will tell you about is the injection injury. So this is where you can inject yourself with paint. Very dangerous when you've got a machine that's sort of 2,500, 3,000 PSI, and you inject yourself with that, if you're not careful, and that paint will go then into your bloodstream, and then your heart obviously pumps that around your body. There's a guy in America actually grabbed the hose when this happened. It went into his arm, shot at the back of his neck. And he had to have 18 blood transfusions to save him. So very dangerous, very unlikely, but can happen. But in the back of the tip packet here, it's got all the warnings on there, what this tip will go up to in PSI and bar. So it's do not exceed 5,000 PSI and 340 bar. Very unlikely you'll be spraying anything emulsion and woodwork based at that sort of pressure, to be honest. I say the pressures I go sort of 2,800, 2,500 is the highest I'll be going. But also on this leaflet that you get with the tip, it's displaying everything about injection injuries. So what I would say for you to do is to just take this and put it in your wallet. As you go onto jobs, if you did inject yourself with paint, straight to the hospital, you've got that piece of paper on you all the time. And you give that to the nurse or the doctor that you're seeing, and they know exactly what's happened to you. This is something that's very uncommon that would happen. So if you went to hospital and said, I've injected myself with paint, they might sit you in the waiting room and say, yeah, sit there for a couple of hours. And within that time, your body is pumping that paint around. So it needs to be acted on very quickly. So having that with you, it explains a lot more about it, and you haven't got to sort of stand there and sort of trying to explain yourself. This will explain it for them. So what we'll talk about now is pressures with what tip, what paint. I mean, this is a question I get asked multiple times, is what tip and what pressure am I spraying that at? And this all depends on so many things. So firstly, what paint are you using? How thick is the paint? How cold is it the day you're spraying? Is the viscosity of the paint thicker because of the weather? Is it hot or colder? There's so many different things that could mean. So for me, it's like when that fan pattern is right, so I'll show you in a video now. Once that fan is, you've lost the tails in that fan, then that is when you know that the pressure is right. So for me, it's when that fan sprays properly and you've lost those tails, then that is what you're spraying at. That is your working pressure. As I said, each day that could depend on weather. So if I'm spraying today and it's 30 degrees, you know, my pressure might be around 1,500 PSI spraying woodwork. But then when I come to the same product in a colder season and the paint's a little bit colder, then I might be spraying at 1,800. This is something you're going to have to test and see how it works. Another thing that's going to change that outcome is that if you have a white paint, then there's going to be hardly any base in there, so there's going to be the paint itself. Now if you mix the colour with that paint, so same product, exactly the same product, but now you're mixing the colour into it. So that colour is going to change the viscosity of the paint. So that means that paint is now going to be thinner. So then that would spray at a lower pressure. What I say in general though is find a pressure that is a little bit higher than what it might spray at, and then generally that works all year round. So for me, it's like when I'm spraying emulsions, I'm spraying around, you know, in the summer you might get up to 2,000 PSI, but in the winter it might be 2,300 say. So for me, I spray all year round at 2,500, because then at least I know then that is the pressure I put the machine at, and that's what I can spray at all year round. This is something I just had to work out for myself, but at the end of the day is that I think that if you're changing from summer to winter months, say, and you're spraying at 2,000 PSI in the summer, but then in the winter you need to spray at 2,400 because the paint viscosity is a lot thicker, or the paint's changed slightly, or there's colour in it, then that's going to be two things. That's going to mean that your speed's going to have to change, but also your pressure's going to have to change. So for me, it's like if you find that pressure is just over what you probably need, that will work around the same season, so winter and summer, then you're never going to have to change your speed, and it's going to be a lot less testing. I think that they spray better, so the higher the pressure, I think that it atomises better. So when you're doing your tests on your paper, once those tails are gone, just take it up a couple of 100 psi higher than what you normally would. You'll get a better finish, as I said, because it atomises a lot nicer.